Chapter 37. Malcolm was worried. The venom had been in Halt's system for several days now, and at any time he could go into the final stages. He was peaceful for the moment, and his temperature was normal. But if he became agitated and feverish again, tossing and turning and calling out, that would signal the end was only a few hours away. Will was racing against time to bring back the Genevesian before Halt reached that stage. Their best guess was that Tennyson's camp would be about 4 hours away. 4 hours there, and 4 hours back. In 1 hour, Halt could be dead. He glanced over to the tall young warrior sitting hunched over his knees, staring into space. He wished there was some way to help Horace, some encouragement he could offer. But Horace knew the situation as well as he did, and Malcolm wasn't in the habit of offering false hope and soothing words at a time like this. False hope was worse than the small hope they did have. Halt gave a low moan and turned on his side. Instantly, Malcolm was alert, watching him like a hawk. Had he simply stirred in his sleep? Or would this be the beginning of the end? For a few seconds, Halt lay still, and his anxiety began to abate. Then he muttered again, louder this time, and began to thrash about, trying to throw the blankets off. Malcolm hurried to his side, dropping to his knees and putting his hand on the bearded ranger's forehead. It was hot to the touch, far too hot to be normal. Halt's eyes were screwed shut now, but he continued to cry out. At first they were just inarticulate sounds. Then he suddenly cried a warning. "Will, take your time. Don't rush the shot." Malcolm heard Horace's quick footsteps as the young man moved to stand behind him. "Is he all right?" Horace asked. Under the circumstances, it was a ridiculous question. Halt was anything but all right, and Malcolm drew his breath to give a cutting reply. Then he stopped. It was a natural reaction on Horace's part. "No," he said. "He's in trouble. Hand me my medicine satchel, please, Horace." The satchel was actually within easy reach, but he knew it would be better for the young man to think he was helping. Horace passed the leather case to Malcolm, who quickly searched through it, his practiced fingers going quickly to the vial he needed. It contained a light brown liquid, and he used his teeth to remove the stopper. "Hold his jaw open," he said briefly. Horace knelt on Halt's other side and forced the ranger's mouth open. Halt struggled against him, trying to toss his head from side to side to avoid his touch. But he was weakened by the ordeal of the past few days, and Horace was too strong for him. Malcolm leaned forward and allowed a few drops of the brown liquid to fall into Halt's tongue. Again the ranger reacted, arching his back and trying to break free. "Hold his mouth shut until he swallows," Malcolm said tersely. Horace obliged, clamping his big hands over the ranger's mouth and closing it. Halt tossed and moaned, but after some time they saw his throat move, and Malcolm knew he had swallowed the draught. "All right," he said. "You can let him go." Horace relinquished his iron grip on Halt's jaw. The ranger spluttered and coughed and tried to rise, but now Horace had his hands on his shoulders, holding him down. After a minute or so, his movements gradually began to weaken. His voice died away to a mumble, and he slept fitfully. Malcolm signaled for Horace to relax. There was perspiration on the young warrior's forehead, and the healer knew it was from more than just exhaustion. It was nervous perspiration, brought on by his fear for Halt and his uncertainty. Powerful emotions, Malcolm knew, and capable of taking a heavy physical toll. "Malcolm," Horace said, "what's happening?" He had recognized that this was a new phase in Halt's suffering. Malcolm had told him that Halt would go through various phases, although he hadn't described this, the final phase, in any detail. But Horace knew that any change in behavior or condition could only be bad news now. Halt was deteriorating, and Horace wanted to know how bad the situation was. Malcolm looked up and met his worried gaze. "I'm not going to lie to you, Horace. He's calmer now because of the drug I just gave him. That'll wear off in an hour or so, and he'll start to thrash around again. Each time he does, it'll be worse. He'll drive the poison further and further into his system, and that'll be the end." "How long can you keep giving him the drug?" Horace asked. "Will could be back here at any time." Malcolm shrugged. "Maybe twice more, maybe 3 times. But he's weak, Horace, and it's a powerful drug. If I give him too much and too often, it could kill him just as easily as the poison." "Isn't there anything you can do?" Horace said, feeling tears stinging his eyes. He felt so helpless, so useless, standing by and watching Halt sink deeper and deeper. If the ranger were in a battle, surrounded by enemies, Horace wouldn't hesitate to charge to his aid. He understood that sort of situation and could cope with it. But this terrible waiting and watching, wringing his hands in anguish and unable to accomplish anything, this was worse than any battle he could imagine. Malcolm said nothing. There was nothing for him to say. He saw the anger in Horace's eyes, saw his face flushing with rage. "You healers, you're all the same. You have your potions and your spells and mumbo-jumbo, and in the end, it all comes down to nothing. All you can do is say, 'Wait and see.'" The accusation was unfair. Malcolm wasn't like the general run of healers, many of whom were mountebanks and charlatans. Malcolm dealt in herbs and drugs and knowledge of the human body and its systems. He was undoubtedly the most skilled and learned healer in Araluan. But sometimes skill and knowledge simply weren't enough. After all, if healers were infallible, nobody would ever die. Deep down, Horace knew this, and Malcolm, knowing that he knew, took no offense. He understood that the warrior's anger was directed at the situation, at his own feeling of utter helplessness, and not at Malcolm himself. "I'm sorry, Horace," he said simply. Horace stopped his tirade and released a long breath, his shoulders sagging. He knew his words had been ill-considered, and he knew, too, that Malcolm must feel an even worse sense of helplessness than he did. After all, this was what Malcolm was trained for, and he could do nothing. Horace made a small sideways gesture with his hand. No, he said. "You've nothing to apologize for. I know you've done your best, Malcolm. Nobody could have done better. It's just—" He couldn't finish the sentence. He wasn't even sure what it was he was going to say, but he realized that his words spelled his acceptance of the fact that Halt would die. There was nothing more that they could do for him. If Malcolm couldn't help him, nobody could. He turned, his hand up to his eyes, hiding the tears there, and walked away. Malcolm started after him, then decided it might be better to leave him. He turned back to Halt and dropped to his knees beside him once more. He frowned in concentration, staring at the ranger. In another half an hour, the brown liquid would begin to lose its effect, and Halt would go into another paroxysm. He could ease that, but it would be a temporary solution. The attacks would continue and get worse. It was a downward spiral. Unless... An idea was forming in his mind. It was a desperate idea, but this was a desperate situation. He breathed deeply several times, closing his eyes and concentrating. He forced his mind to ignore side issues and to focus on the main problem, turning the idea over in his mind, seeking the faults and the dangers and finding many of both. Then he considered the alternative. He could keep Halt comfortable for a few more hours, maybe 2 or 3, in the hope that Will would return. But he knew what a remote chance that was. Even if Will caught the Genevesian before that, he would travel more slowly on the return journey with a prisoner. In 4 hours, Halt would probably be dead. Not probably, he amended, almost certainly. He came to a decision and rose, walking toward the young warrior who was leaning miserably against a tree some meters away. He saw the drooping shoulders, the bowed head, the body language that told him Horace had given up. Then he felt a sudden stab of doubt. Did he have the right to give him this renewed hope? Hope that might well prove to be misplaced. If he buoyed Horace's expectations and Halt still died, how could he forgive himself? Would it be better to simply accept the situation, do what he could for Halt, and let nature take its course? He shook his head, a new resolve forming in his mind. That was never the way. It never should be. If there was the slightest chance to save a patient, then he would take it. He would fight to the very end. "Horace?" he said softly. The young man turned to him, and Malcolm saw the tears that streaked his face. "There might be something," he began. He saw the hope in Horace's eyes and held up a hand to forestall him. "It's a very slim chance, and it might not work. It could even kill him," he warned. For a moment he saw Horace recoil mentally from the outcome, and then the warrior recovered himself. "What do you have in mind?" "It's something I've never done before, but it could work. The drug I gave him is a very dangerous drug. As I said, it could kill him, even without the poison. But if I were able to give him enough so that he almost died, it might save him." Horace frowned, not understanding. "How can you save him if you almost kill him?" And Malcolm had to admit that, put that way, it seemed like a crazy plan. But he stuck to his guns. "If I take him right to the edge, everything in his body will slow down. His pulse, his breathing, his entire system. And the effects of the poison will slow down as well. We'll buy him some time, maybe 8 hours, maybe more." He saw the effect those words had on Horace. In 8 hours, Will would almost certainly be back, if he managed to capture the Genevesian. Suddenly, Horace felt a terrible doubt. What if the Genevesian had killed Will? He pushed the thought aside. He had to believe in something today. Will would be back, and if Halt were still alive, Malcolm could cure him. Suddenly, there was hope where there had only been black despair. "How do you do it?" he asked. Malcolm chewed his lip for a second or two, then decided there was no easy way to express what he had in mind. "I'll give him a massive overdose of the drug, but not quite enough to kill him." "And how will that be? Do you know how? Have you ever done this before?" Again, Malcolm hesitated. "No," he said. "I've never done this before. I don't know of anyone who has. And as for how much to give him, frankly, I'll be guessing. He's weak already. I don't know how much to give him, but I can't be sure." There was a long silence between them. Then Malcolm continued, "It's not a decision I want to make, Horace. It should be made by a friend." Horace met his gaze and nodded, understanding. "It should be made by Will." Malcolm made a small gesture of agreement. "Yes, but he's not here. And you're Halt's friend, too. You may not be as close to him as Will is, but you do love him, and I'm asking you to make that decision. I can't make it for you." Horace heaved a deep sigh and turned away, looking out through the trees to the empty horizon, as if Will might suddenly appear and make this all unnecessary. Still looking away, he said slowly, "Let me ask you this. If this were your friend, your closest friend, would you do it then?" Now it was Malcolm's turn to pause and consider his answer. "I think so," he said after a few seconds. "I hope I'd have the courage. I'm not sure I would, but I hope I would." Horace turned back to him with the ghost of a sad smile on his face. "Thanks for the honest answer. I'm sorry about what I said before. You deserve better than that." Malcolm waved the apology aside. "Already forgotten," he said. "But what's your decision?" He indicated Halt, and as he did so the ranger began to stir again, muttering in a low voice. The first dose of the drug was beginning to wear off. Malcolm realized that this was an important moment, a window of opportunity. "The drug's wearing off," he continued. "It's out of his system. That makes it easier for me to figure out the right dosage. I don't want to allow for what I've already given him." Horace looked from Malcolm to Halt, then came to a decision. "Do it."